Making a lot of noise over there.
You know, bells. Not a whole lot I can say about that.
Did you get? Okay.
Yeah, I go.
By the way, just a little update there. With the trouble with the meeting notifications, they've sent it up the chain. So
What's that?
with the meeting notifications, they're sending it up the chain. So they switched their notifications to go through the website instead of through the meeting software. And with that update, you were getting updates daily. So I said, that's a bit much.
Yeah.
So then they did an adjustment and then you got none. I'm like, that's a little bit too much. So, yeah, they're working on it now. Nothing came out of it. It looks like 5 minutes. I'm gonna go off back. This is me. Huh?
Here's a short too.
Okay.
Closer I get to my laptop, the better. Hi.
Hi.
Carolyn,
I'm John Goodman.
I assumed as much. Yeah.
Probably only a billion here tonight.
The Casa de Fedora is closed on Mondays. What is that? Oh.
Was that your dinner plan?
That was my dinner plan. Yeah.
I've been
So-
closing a lot because of the heat.
Oh, it's too hot in there. They don't have great ventilation.
I'm nuts if you're hungry.
What's that?
He's renting stuff. I don't think he's planning on selling anything because I'm like, there.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Is there any word what's gonna happen to Big Cheese? The restaurant there?
Still trying to sell it. Maybe.
Well, apparently they were okay with the last inspection and they just bought it. They didn't
Okay.
get it inspected again.
Oh, I've got one.
That'd be awesome. Please. At this point, I'll take any Thai food that I don't have to drive somewhere to get.
Have you had the Carson one yet?
I have, I like it.
Is it good?
Yeah. It's decent. I mean, for not having to drive.
I just need to write out my name.
That might be handy.
I'm so not wanting to drive anywhere that I have that Columbia Gorge deliveries, but they've never delivered. They're like always off.
What's that?
And it's like a kid, a local kid that started it up when he was in high school during COVID. And I've got delivery to my house a couple of times, but every time that I really want it, it always says, "So day off," or whatever.
Oh, darn it.
And I'm like, I'm not driving all the way to Carson.
Be honest.
All the way.
For real. That's what I think in my head.
You went to college is what you're trying to start around.
How dare he?
Nerve, isn't it?
Ridiculous.
Nice entrepreneur. Gonna come.
I am the day I was at a hotel for training and ordered 2 large pizzas because I didn't want to go to Kona. And you know, minimum to get delivery. So
Hey,
that
that
was
sounds like
aggressive.
something I would do. I'm not kidding.
We ate on that for
I'm ordering 2 for
I
me.
think both
after
Ken and
brought it
Michael
home.
both be promoted to panelist.
Did anybody say they're not coming?
I have not heard.
I talked to
Scott's
Scott, will be
gonna be
late
late.
coming.
Michael.
Michael's on.
Yeah, there he goes.
Okay.
Michael's on. I haven't heard from Paul.
Well, we have a quorum. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay,
There we go.
there you are. Michael.
Call the meeting to order.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. It is 6:01 on the 29th of August. I invite you to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, public comments. Do we have any public comments?
And so just as a heads up, the reason why public comments are on here is if council makes any decision, you're required to allow public comments before that. So like just in.
Okay, hearing none, we will move on then to council business. Annexation request 2022-01, Liana.
Okay, I apologize for the lateness of the delivery. That was not the intent. But anyway, working on that with the software company as far as notifications of that. So again, but no decision is required tonight anyway. So hopefully that helps. But we received an annexation request for a 1-lot property. It's about 2 acres, 2.2 acres.
Breaking it forward.
And yes, and the plan is, he wants to subdivide the property into 4 lots. And it's up Frank John's, 1 lot outside of city limits, but it does touch city limits, on the back end of the property. And so it meets all of the, requirements for being annexed as far as it is contiguous to city limits, and that it is touching city limits. And there's been a request. I mean, that's really all we have. So meets those requirements. And the other, so the methodology that this annexation is coming through is called the petition method. And so in order, there's 2 phases to the petition method. This is the first phase. And so you have to have 10% of the property owners, 10% of the assessed valuation of the property owners in the area that's to be annexed have to sign a petition saying they want to be annexed. We have 100%.
Is
So
that
it-
unincorporated or otherwise?
What?
Any unincorporated?
Yes.
Right?
Right. Yes. And so, so on the face of it, I mean, it seems like a simple, straightforward annexation, you would think. And so, and the reason why he's wanting to annex in is in order to get those lots subdivided, they need to have water access. And so he would like city water. And so the requirement is that he annex the property or that the city denies the annexation. So those are those are some of the 2 areas that those properties can get city water. So again, it is 1 lot, but it is 1 lot outside of Frank John's Road. So there's a property just to the south of him that does not want to annex in. As part of our annexation process for an application, you have to talk to the neighbors to see who else wants to annex in. And that neighbor did not want to annex in. For logistical reasons, we tend to want to just have continuous frontage on city roads when we do annexations. And so there are sort of 3 other options for geographic modification. So again, we're not going to make a decision tonight. And in the memo, there is a link to the MRSC handbook on annexations because it can get challenging to decipher all of the ins and outs of it. At the 10% stage, council can reject the intent to annex, they can accept it as is, or they can geographically modify that request. And so in front of you are 3 options for geographic modifications, if you would like to do a geographic modification. And so again, option 1 just adds that lot to the south. However, the property to the south is a higher assessed valuation than the property to the north. And so the likelihood of that annexation going through is very low. Especially because they said they did not want to be annexed in.
Do they have to agree to be annexed in?
So the next phase is you have the 60% petition. And so that is 60% of the assessed valuation needs to sign of the property owners of the assessed valuation in the area have to sign the petition to be annexed. And that's where the last annexation sort of fell off as well. But so in this instance, the neighbor would need to be annexed, would need to sign the petition to be annexed in order for it to move forward with both parcels.
And you're talking about option 1.
I'm talking about option 1, yes.
So option 1 isn't happening.
Not unless the neighbor changes their mind.
Okay.
But also, but that's also, but council can still move forward with geographically modifying that. I don't know if there's a time frame, and Ken can correct me if I'm wrong on the 60%, like when so Ken, is there a time frame between when council says moves forward with the 10% between when the 60% has to come in?
No, I don't remember one.
Right.
As far as the, am I a panelist? I'm having
No, you're
trouble-
not. No, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. But at any rate, I don't remember a time frame there. I know that there is a time after the initial petition that you have to hold this hearing to decide whether you're going to annex or not annex or geographically modify. But as far as if you decide you need geographic modification, I don't recall that there's any hard and fast timeline for that. I'd have to look at that. Maybe you go on, I'll see if I can find that.
There's a timeline. I think it's like 6 months from when the last signature is on that 60% petition, but that's really it. So there's an expiration date on the signatures of the petition, but not that I could find anyway between when it's submitted. So again, that's an option. And then there's 2 more options that are a little bit more ambitious, I guess you could say. One is, so when you do an annexation, you do want to, again, get all properties along the road. You also want to try to get both sides of the road. But option 2 takes in an area that was that tried to annex in. And so there are some people in that area that are for annexation. It all just depends. Again, the sort of the caveat to my memo was there's no requirements put on the annexation area. And so I feel like their option 2 may be successful if there's no requirements put on the annexation. Where the previous annexation failed was when there was a list of infrastructure improvements that were required, not at time of annexation, but right. And there wasn't a dollar amount put on that either. And so there was lacking information. And then I think the people that were proponents of it and kind of leading the charge, I think they just bought property elsewhere. And so they didn't need for that to go through. And then staff didn't do any additional research, nor were they asked to move that forward at all.
Some of the property owners in that area changed since then.
Right. Mm-hmm. But there may be some development challenges with some of the parcels. So there, so is one of them not able to develop or having challenges developing?
The
because of
main
that?
reason why you're gonna get annexation requests is the same reason you get this. That it's, water.
Mm.
And going by water. unless it's- so,
Mhm.
Some of the properties that are in that area continue to have no access to water and continue to go undeveloped.
So
We have
do
problems
we,
with wells here too.
do we provide water without septic?
Without sewer.
Huh?
Without sewer.
Without sewer? Okay.
Well, and so that's one of, we can get further into that later. Again, it seems straightforward, nice and easy.
You can see where I'm going with this.
Yes,
can't you?
yeah.
Yes.
And so option 3, again, squares it up to the east and west, annexing both sides of Kanaka. The reason why it goes all the way out to Kanaka is because when you cross the street from Frank John's, the property across the street then abuts Kanaka, and so then you cross the street, and so you just kind of keep going. And so it just kind of does a complete square up of all of those properties. And again, is more ambitious than option 2. And I believe you talked to the neighbor across the street, and they were not interested in annexation. So,
And in option 3, the, what I call the Cameron property, that would be included in that, right?
It's already, it goes all the way up to that.
In option 3? Yeah, and
64, 84 acres.
84 acres is option 3.
Mm.
goes up to the west edge of that, correct?
And so there's some brief numbers as far as tax impacts, likelihood of passing, the number of unimproved lots that would be annexed in. And of course, the larger size that you get, the more initial property taxes you get, as well as when those properties develop, you'll get money from the real estate excise taxes when they're sold, and when they're developed, you'll get that instant increase, not only in property value, but also in sales tax. And so on John's proposal, he wants to just subdivide 4 lots. And I'm assuming you just want to sell them and have them developed. So based on the cost of houses and inflation lately that have been sort of coming through, we assume $600,000 roughly cost to build for 4 lots. And so the sales tax just on that development would be $180,000 at 7.7. That's the, 7.7%. And then the future real estate excise tax would be just $1,000, and that's just assuming $100,000 for each of the lots, not assuming that a developer would come in and build the house and then sell that house either. So there's future revenues as well. And then the property tax increase after development would be $5,000. In addition to what's already there. So that's just on 1 lot. I didn't do it for any of the others, but as you see, there's in option 2 and 3, there's about 5 unimproved lots. There are also, as you see, some larger parcels there. But those have an improvement on them, so they're not included in that calculation of 5 unimproved lots. So again, if there was a house on a very large lot, there's topography issues all throughout the city. And so I didn't do any additional speculation further than just the 1 subdivision that's trying to go through. The biggest cost and challenge with the city as far as annexations go, and a decision, because we really don't have much leverage outside of annexation, and some with development, is the road improvements. And so I took basically the cost for Russell Avenue, and that is basically 2 lanes, parking lanes, sidewalks, which is our standard for Frank John's and for Bone Road. and Kanaka as well. And so I took the cost per linear foot that it took us to do Russell. Granted, the sidewalks would be a little bit narrower, but inflation, again, it's all big estimates. And so if we did the Russell Avenue level of improvements out in these areas, again, and that is our standard, for option 3, it comes to about $9.1 million. I'm not saying that's what should be done,
Right.
but I'm saying those are our standards. And the goal of council, as far as what we talked about in our transportation improvement plan, is to bring all of the city streets up to city standards. And so the question is would we want to annex in streets that are not up to standards already and sort of further bring us into that hole? So,
Would, if this if we annex under initial proposal, how much of the road goes with that annex? Is it center line or is it all the way to the west side of the road?
it'd be center line, but we can talk
Might
with
as
the
well
county.
be
I mean,
the
might as
whole
well be the whole
thing,
thing, yeah.
and the road and the sidewalk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ken.
This is Loop Road, right? It's off Loop Road.
Yeah, it's off Loop Road. It's Frank John's.
Frank John's, my recollection is both Loop and Frank John's go to center line.
Okay, yeah. There you
That's
go.
my recollection.
I think that there's no set decision, and so you can make agreements with the county to not annex this portion or to annex the whole thing or split jurisdiction. I think.
Well, and the only reason I'm asking is because of maintenance of the road.
But that's really splitting hairs. I mean, we wouldn't just plow one side.
Oh, no.
We wouldn't pick it up to jump over the south lot and then
That'd be
just do
really
Goodman. Right, and so then it can get a little bit complicated. We have some issues. There's a section of Loop, as you know, that's county on one side and city on the other. And so that gets a little bit tricky because the county technically has a sidewalk, but we work to maintain it because we get calls on it. And then there's some neighbors who have agreements with the county that says that they, won't, that the county won't clear vegetation. And so it gets to be kind of a weird, like, rabbit hole. So we would end up in it, like, whether we.
Well, and when you're talking to Russell Avenue standards, that would be a sidewalk on both sides of the street. And so that's why I was asking, how far do we go?
So water and sewer, there are also some deficiencies that were noted. And we don't have cost estimates for water and what would need to be addressed. That can be addressed either at annexation. I mean, there are other tools that you can use other than annexation for some of these, but annexation is an easy tool to use.
How hard is it to put the fire hydrants in there? What does that entail?
Money.
Well,
Yeah,
You also
That's a
may want to
lot.
make sure that you have fire flow too, so it's not
Yeah.
just.
And that would be options 2 and 3, right?
Where there's a fire hydrant on the north side.
Yeah. So I pulled up the fire hydrant map and there are some fire hydrants in the area. We would just need
They
to
have a-
do some.
they have a minimum. And then they're also required at every intersection.
Yeah, so we'd have to do some further analysis on it.
You know, intersection here, so just do this.
So, yeah.
What kind of a lineal footage have you got from Kanaka Creek Frank John's to up Kanaka Creek to the top edge of option 1 or of the main option?
Say that again.
Pardon?
Say that again.
Okay, John's original proposal. How many lineal feet have we got to the north end of that? From I guess it'd be from Clover.
From Groper.
Because they're talking 400 feet, 400 per lineal foot, right?
Are you talking about
I'm just trying to
sewer?
figure out what it's the cost
750.
to run the sewer
Oh, okay, okay. Gotcha.
off of Groveland.
Oh, from the edge of what's there now, or what just,
What just finished the top?
Almost 2,000 feet of sewer main is required to extend to the extent of the subject parcel independent.
Where are you looking at there?
Page 30, the bottom,
Page
the
30?
last sentence after.
Thank you.
oh, good for me. I was just gonna measure for you again. You put in an answer to a question I was gonna get asked.
Are you the one who measured, did you measure all these out? The area?
No, actually, all of our maps are like a tiny bit different.
Because that option 3 looks like that was fun.
Oh, yeah, that was Leonard's.
Doing the area on option.
Oh,
3.
that was just a bunch of clicks. So it wasn't.
Yeah, map recipients who do that.
Mhm.
Right, that's how I do it, but I always have a problem when it's like that. Maybe it's just me.
Practice. It took me a couple times. Sometimes. The first one is actually the hardest because it was so small. So again, if you
That's a
have,
question though, how much money, you know, how much money would it take to extend sewer? How much money would it take to extend water? For each of these?
yes, yeah. And so I did a brief a short estimate based on the 2,000 linear foot based off of our recent main D project. And so, but I assumed that was all of the parcels in the area, not just.
Right.
So, so when I did the average cost of of $35,000 per property for that LID cost, that assumed that it's 2,000 linear feet to do everything.
So it's 2,000 feet from Groper up to the top edge of proposed annexation.
Not Grouper, so it's
No.
from where the extended sewer line as far as main D stopped up to the top, to the fur end of Goodman property. So we did this, it went up loop and then it took a left and started to go up Frank John's and it stopped at some point at Frank John's, like about, I forget what that little road is called. So it would be extended from there to the top of Goodman along Frank John's, not along Kanaka.
Oh,
And not along Bone.
No.
And so I did my estimate, assuming it also went up Kanaka and Bone. And so my estimate for the $35,000 is not right per property. So it would be more per property because there's less properties to spread that cost over.
Would it be possible to run it up Kanaka?
It would be longer, turn it up Kanaka and then over to Goodman, to the Goodman property.
But the Goodman property is right alongside Kanaka.
It's on Frank
No, it's on
John's.
Frank John's.
Frank John, excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait a minute.
So yeah, if we continued up Frank John's, that would be the shortest distance. 2,000 is the shortest distance.
Are we not talking about his annexation? Are we not talking about right above where Douglas's used to live? Okay, well, I'm screwed up.
You get lost in maps.
Pull up a map.
We'll walk over. So this.
Okay,
He
you're
has a
right.
computer
Okay.
right in front of him.
Got it.
I've got one behind me. I see.
Okay, I see it now.
Certainly aren't like infinite options for water and sewer extensions, so we can certainly make those estimates, but it is costly.
And so with all of these, though, the sewer question is the bigger one and it goes towards the zoning. Again, nothing simple. So counting zoning, if they have it classified as R1, it's not the same as the city R1. You can have up to 4 units on an R1 lot in the county. And so the closest that it comes to ours is R3. Recently we changed the code to require lots in the R3 zone to be connected to sewer. All of the lots within the city limits that are currently zoned R3 are already within 300 feet of sewer, so it makes no difference whether or not we require it. But it would make a difference on this lot if we changed it to R3. The other question is that density compatible with that area as well? We don't have a limit on our R3 zone. It just depends on how many units you can fit on whatever lot size you have and topography constraints within our code. But an option could also be to change the zoning code to create a different zone to allow up to 4 lots, which would then make anything that we would annex in from the county's R1 compatible, whether it had 1 or 4 units on it.
Ben? What would be the reason for zoning it R3 as opposed to one of the others? Other than the density? Could he not have 4 lots in R2?
You can have 4 lots in R2. The city's comprehensive plan, so our vision for the future is to say that we're gonna watch these areas develop on city water and sewer, and that they're gonna develop at lot sizes that are smaller than 15,000 square feet.
Okay,
And the only zone that would accomplish both of those things would be the R3 zone.
Okay.
And so that's the city's vision. The best way under existing zoning to accomplish the city's vision be to do that. According to the city, the best way, according to the property owner, I'm sure that that's not the case because of the sewer question.
sure.
And so a copy of that map is, I think, one of the last 2 maps.
Yeah.
In the packet, just kind of see the overall vision of what was planned in the comprehensive plan for that area.
So the R3C, is that a C? What is that? County? What is that? What is that little
The,
fuzzy thing there?
on your map.
Fluffy?
So
Thingamajigger.
It's a technical term.
Oh, it is. It doesn't mean anything.
Okay, so right now we've got R1 up off of Groper, correct? Or are these suggested zoning?
What are you looking at?
I'm looking at
Map
page 31.
Oh, okay.
Current zoning, yeah, is essentially R1 adjacent to all of the area we're looking at, except for this area of R3, which is where Cherry Lane was and Whitecap Apartments are, and then the DeGroot fourplex.
Okay,
And so that's an area that was brought into the city in 2007, when this distinction between county R1, which is what it is,
okay,
and city R1 really became known, is that those were conforming uses in the county. We brought them into the city, they burned down, we said you couldn't rebuild that. Sorry. And so they applied for the zone change to R3 to match the development that was in place. We required them to connect to water and sewer because they had not been connected.
Are we talking about Russell? Or not specific?
Whitecap Apartments is the one
Oh.
that drove that.
so in that R3 zone, we are looking at, would that be part of Cameron's property?
From the edge of Cameron's. So Cameron is,
To the east,
yeah, it's this big one here.
right,
Currently
okay,
R1.
all right. So they're all in R1.
And so I think the direction that staff needs is guidance on what the requirements are around annexation that you want to have.
Other than
We have no policy, we have no
petitioning
guidance.
and that stuff.
I mean, we could not require them to have any improvements. We just annex them in. Is that what?
So, but the underlying question is still what zone? And if it doesn't fit into a zone that we have,
Oh, no, I'm just at the very base question,
Right.
first of all, like,
So
do you
like
want them to
require
require
sewer and
infrastructure
water.
improvements
Right.
or we annex it? Then we'll get to, I mean, that then drives zoning,
Mhm.
because if you're not gonna require water and sewer, then R3 is out unless you want to still make it R3 and just not have a big requirement of annexation. But it kind of,
It's a really hard one for us to recommend on. Leon
Yeah.
talked about the challenges of just drawing the area.
Yeah.
Because of how big the lots are and they go from road to road out there. It's tough too, because we don't know what your expectations are for things like this. We've got the comprehensive plan that says discourage development so that they get sewer up there. And so your tolerance for looking at the property owners and saying, yeah, you got to bring sewer up there. Is something that we need to feel out for you.
what's the timeline when you're required to be on sewer? Starting tomorrow, you need to start working on it?
Bills get flushed out.
Was that one of the things that you were looking forward to, that density with the?
No, it was roughly half acre lot, 0.4, 0.6, and I already had the tested up for septic, that's all my plan was originally. Just water is one.
But the multifamily housing was not anything that was in
No,
your back of your mind.
I laid it out so you have 3,000 square foot plates that you can put the houses on.
What do similar cities have for this type thing? White Salmon or something?
oh, white salmon didn't require anything for annexation. But white salmon is a little bit different in that their water extends dramatically past their city limits. And so they're in a different scenario where no one was really encouraged to annex in. So they wanted people to annex in, so they didn't put those restrictions on annexation.
What other cities often do is they pair the utility connection with an agreement to annex at some future date. And so they'll have access to those utilities, they'll be paying those rates. And then at some point, the city will say, yeah, it's time for us to take this area over. We've already got these property owners' permission to do that.
So the other direction that council can take also is, and we have been meaning to have this conversation, COVID kind of pushed out some of the meetings, was on the deliberate growth strategy, as far as like allowing connections outside of city limits with those agreements. So if council doesn't necessarily want to move forward with annexation, but you still want to allow for additional water connections, then that is one route to go. One of the challenges with that, though, is you again have sort of similar issues that we have going on right now, and that you'll have development and then we'll annex in, but there's no, unless you require them to do improvements upon annexation, there's no recourse, and you'll end up with sort of some of the challenges we have right now, where you have that legacy home or legacy street with no way,
Street.
or no street, right, and no teeth really to have improvements or have them be brought up to city standards at the time. So, and then the only revenue that the city would be getting if you do allow them to connect would be related to water. You wouldn't be getting any of the property tax improvement revenue for that. But then you also don't have the requirements for the street maintenance. Another impact that this has, so in the annexation analysis too, I showed the impact to the other districts. As you can see, it's a very little impact to the county road district, but it's a larger impact to the fire district too. So it's for for option 2 and 3, it's 4 and 5% of their budget. So it's a bigger hit than, you know, to the county road budget. But that is something that needs to be taken into consideration, especially because we have a partnership with them for services. And so if we take funds from them, we then have to pony up more under the current agreements. And I think those are the only 2 districts that are impacted. Everything else is the same thing. School district, same EMS, same.
Well, that's good, at least.
Well, especially since we're kind of landlocked, we only have so much space that we can grow into as a city. It's like we should be fairly receptive to annexation. So if that happens to mean that Fire District 2 loses some of their tax money, that's something we're just going to have to find a way to work out. It feels weird to say, ooh, I don't know about all that. Maybe not.
Right. So we could put something on there that says that they're gonna have to hook up to city water, but not city sewer? Or would we want to do both?
We don't really have to say that they have to hook up to city water, because that's really the only reason why people are trying to annex. I mean, that's one of also the policies. There's once you're inside city limits, you can't drill a well anymore. So,
It's not a good time to begin with,
well,
even outside of city.
yeah.
If we ran the sewer up to the annexation, what would happen with all of the adjacent property owners all along that?
So the
Why?
city did it. So there's a couple of different ways we can do it. We can do it the way we did Main D, which is a latecomers agreement. The other way we can do it is a local improvement district. And there's a couple of different ways to go about that. One is they can request to be a part of it, and you can get their concurrence with that improvement district. If you don't, the way that if the city forces a local improvement district, you're only able to assess the property value improvement. So say you have a sidewalk in front of your house and it only improves the value of your home and your property is $5,000, but it costs the city $20,000 to put it in. We can only ask for $5,000. So that's the same thing with if we force an LID, if we force, the $800,000, we would have to do an analysis to see what that property, that market value or the assessed value would increase because of that sewer connection.
Because of the sewer connection.
And that would kind of be the risk we would have.
And then those that are participating in LID, it's a tax.
It's an additional property tax.
It shows up as part of their tax burden every year.
Whether they're connected to sewer or not. Yeah, so they have to pay for those improvements, but they pay for those improvements on the LID, and then when they connect to sewer, they're only paying the system development charges. Whereas if they're on a latecomers agreement, they're paying the latecomers fee on top of the SDCs. It's just different.
Wow. John,
Yeah.
can you make this easy on us?
He's like, I just want to do one lot. I'm like, I gave him a phone call on Friday, letting him know.
You know, as I talked to both Ben and Leanna in the past, I used to work for Intel and build factories. And a lot of times we go into something, I would have to sign an agreement. Yes, we will be annexed later, we won't fight it. And that's kind of what I was hoping we could have a situation like that here. Make it part of the deed or whatever, when people buy the property. You know, you're going to be annexed one day. And that's the price of living here. Just like I was kind of amazed you don't have in your books that you can go back to all those people on the city water and say, by the way, in 2 months, you're annexed into the city because you're using our water.
Well, so one
Or
of
is
the
there-
things that Ben points out is in our code, it states that the city can disconnect your water at any time.
There
So
you go.
if we do want people to annex, I mean, I'm not saying we can tell them that we're gonna shut off the water right now, but we can say, hey, in 5 years,
It would be cool to tighten.
I mean,
Tighten up. You have been extended this service outside of city limits. You will be annexed in 5 years as opposed to, it hasn't happened yet. So
or, right,
Mhm.
so,
it doesn't-
but also give them time to just, to figure things out if
Yeah.
they,
Figure out things financially and everything else,
so. But that's not being decided.
What is the base thing that we're looking for, the base decision?
The base decision is, do you want to require infrastructure improvements upon annexation? I think that's one of the key components that we need to understand.
You want to welcome annexation because
Right.
that will help us draw the boundary.
Well, yeah.
Is that two? Yes, no on annexation, and then yes, no on infrastructure improvement.
I think they go together because I feel like if you, the less barriers to annexation, the easier it is to do.
Requiring infrastructure as a barrier.
It is what has killed previous requests for annexation since, I think, the group, the last one maybe, yeah.
Because of the requirement for improvements.
That, there were a couple of things with that one, but I believe that was the biggest one.
So how would that work if we required the infrastructure improvements? They would pay that up front.
No, so basically so I put a draft agreement from what was,
Was it in here?
yeah, done from the last annexation request.
Is water separate from sewer?
It would all be in the same one. It would basically be kind of like a development agreement.
Page 11.
It's or page
Thank you.
15.
Yeah, by the time you get
James,
down
why
to
are
the
you messing
nitty
with
gritty
me?
of it, it's page 15. Is the blank agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, page 14 is just kind of like what's gonna be required, and it's
Mhm.
basically everything. You have fire, road, sewer, stormwater, and water. And then 15 is the actual agreement that talks about the deferral of the improvements. It gives that 10-year limitation and basically says they won't protest any local improvement district. The caveat, though, is it also says that you can't short plat or subdivide until the improvements are installed, or, well, this just says, or an LID for a sewer extension is initiated, but still.
Seems fair.
So that's requiring improvements
At
within
some point.
within
Eventually.
10 years,
At some point,
unless
yes.
there's a division of property.
Is LID has to be
But the 10 years is less of a trigger than it is after that time. This doesn't apply. I don't.
See the conundrum. We like annexation, but do we want annexation without improvement? Because then either we're going to be
That's-
stuck with it, or
that's
is it,
the
that's just the way
conundrum.
it's going to be, and then here we are
We
15
need
years
the
on.
Infrastructure
paying for David
improvements, but
well, and that's where you get comprehensive plans are great if you have the ability to stick with them and what that vision is,
Mhm.
and stay connected to that. Because if you can't stay connected to that vision of that comprehensive plan, it's really hard to implement it when you get an annexation
Right.
request for one lot.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we're at, because right here it says, the comprehensive plan says you shouldn't annex in unless they have sewer. But everyone else in that area is still a septic. I mean, but we're also working on trying to make sure that everyone in city limits at least is on sewer. I mean, it's, yeah,
Is this concept where you'll know, the police separate prisoners and try to talk one into confessing. And if he confesses, he gets off scot-free.
No, we don't do that.
And then
It's a
they're
parable.
doing the other thing. the other
Or an
parable.
allegory.
And in
Parable.
that situation, the prisoner's choice is to say nothing, and then they both go free. Rat out the partner, and then the partner goes to jail. But the other partner is in the same position to say, well, if I say nothing, then then we both go free, or I say something, I guarantee mine. So that's where we're at with development of this area, because potential annexing properties have a choice to develop under city standards, come in subject to all the improvement requirements that you might put on it, or not, and stay on the county and buy it even lower densities, which makes it even harder to achieve the density that you envision, the installation of the utilities that you envision.
So, John, a question. Is the reason that you're wanting to annex is because of the infrastructure?
City water.
Okay. Is it tougher to do it under the county standards?
Have well, I'd have to put a water district in.
Okay, so you'd have to have a community well basically for those 4 parcels.
And there's been, I was fortunate when I drilled, I got a nice well. But along Frank Johns, there's been a lot of dusters. And so it's like, well, do I really?
You're just not using the right witch.
Well, I said I did use a witch and I got water. A witch and well.
There you go.
And an old retired cop from LA that ran a drilling company long gone.
40.
And the reason I was looking for that size of property is if you ever go up there and look at it, I ended the property before with like a little green belt, but it's in a ravine that drops down about 50 to 60 feet. And it's really very picturesque and very peaceful. I enjoy them. On the other side, there's actually 2 ravines that meet right behind my property. Just, having the old growth sit down in there, it's really a nice thing to look at.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see, and unfortunately, these trees keep growing, and I lost my view of the Columbia about 15 years ago. But just having that forest view, I really enjoy it. And I think other people would like to have a forest view like that also. And a decent, half-acre size piece of ground is something I think a lot of people, would love to have in life. Just a smaller lot in suburbia. That's the reason I was shooting for that. And we talked earlier, I could go for smaller lots, but like, I kind of like to have people want to put on a little nicer house and enjoy the view and be quiet.
Yeah, so if you look at page 10, you can kind of see the topography. The closer those are, the deeper it is. I mean,
So what we're looking for is whether or not to require infrastructure, when it gets paid for and how,
in essence,
the when and the how.
I mean, so if we're just annexing in John's lot, there are some frontage improvements that could be required when he does his short plat. That is an option.
Already done the short play.
What? You've already done the short plat? Oh, okay.
And it was done with the county, just like I did all the storm drainage. I spent about $10,000 on
Okay.
all that stuff.
Did that get signed and recorded?
Yeah.
Okay.
Without water?
Well, we had the drawings, it hasn't, no, okay, I guess record is probably wrong. No, it has been recorded,
Okay.
but it's,
Sorry. Yeah.
it's surveyed. They've had copies of it for 9 months, 8 months.
John, what would you like to see done?
Well, I guess I'd love to have it come along and you have to have something that will be attached to the deed after this person bought it that says, okay, I'm not gonna fight the city. I have a water, I've got soil, I got space, so a septic system isn't a problem. I've already checked, had the soil, all the holes dug, and it's been tested for that. So the person could have their own septic, because otherwise that's a pretty heavy lift to build, have to pay for a sewer line all the way down to Frank Johns, for anybody to pay for that. I mean, so ideally, I'd love to leave the sewer off because I'd love to put in their own septic system. I've been on mine for 24 years and it hasn't been a problem. And the soil perks really nice in the area. And with that, I would expect that there's some part of that, I don't know what the wording is, that says, I'm not, I'm not gonna fight you when you come along, and you put me in the city. I understand, I've done that like they around the world. It's kind of like, it's part of doing business.
So what if you, does it have to be 10 years? Is that like is that in the code that says it has to be developed within 10 years? Because could you not have it on the deed or something like he's saying that says you have to add the system and development fees when you start building? So if they build it in 15 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
Statute has a 10-year limitation.
The latecomers agreement, they extended to 20, but that's it.
Right, latecomers, I think we were talking about
Oh, yeah. the
condition of annexation.
Yeah.
The waiver of
Okay.
protest, yeah.
So then the improvements, i.e. sewer, would need to be put in within that 10-year period. Correct?
That's what it sounds like.
Almost more importantly, they can't subdivide until they put those improvements in. So that's, and then the outside time limit would be 10 years, but for all practical purposes, if anybody wants to develop a property, they're going to have to put the improvements in.
Yeah. Although look at topography, there's not
Right. Not a
whole lot of
going on with
choices
some
there.
engineering or
Although
something.
I've seen some stuff going in Portland that makes me wonder.
Right, so while on the map, they look like nice big lots, you can do all sorts of things, yeah.
Yeah.
This topography's.
Have we decided, or is it clear to us whether those 4 lots are already subdivided or are they not? Do they still need to be recorded because they don't have water?
Think that they haven't been recorded.
Curious to me, I don't know the answer, I have to check, but I have drawings was done, I've given them to the county. I'm not sure exactly reported if they've been or not, but what I've been working with, when I was working with them, when they realized, probably I thought they said,
Because that wouldn't be necessarily a requirement for the Goodman property. If the Goodman property is already subdivided.
Yeah, this, what we have here from Terra Survey, does not have the short plan number. That's what the SP dash blah, blah, blah is.
Did I miss the part where we figured out how we were gonna get water up there?
There's already a water line that runs.
Okay.
North south.
It's just an easy part. That's it.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily easy. It's AC, so
Oh.
I mean, we do have a goal to not have that. Doesn't meet. I mean, we have a lot of infrastructure that, my understanding from the strategic plan was, hey, we need to provide a minimum standard to each of our citizens. And related to water, sewer, all the infrastructure, right? So, if we bring on more parcels that don't have, that don't meet the minimum sewer for any of those items, we're just that much further behind. So I guess I'm missing the, what's the real motivation for doing it? Like a little bit of extra revenue? Be nice to help people develop. So that would help me, if I understood that. In conflict with what was discussed before.
Well, and I think I agree that there's a, why do we annex? That's a really a basic question. Why do you want to annex?
For water.
Yeah. Huh?
For water.
Why does the
Well,
city want
city
them
wants
to
to
Why
add?
does the city want to encourage annexation?
Revenue.
What is it? Do
But-
we get enough
But
to
there's
pay
not-
for all
yeah,
of
But
the?
for the amount of money that it takes to put the infrastructure in place,
Mhm.
return on the investment, the way I'm looking at it, isn't there
Mhm.
With one lot.
with one lot, yeah.
with things like our water and sewer systems, we built those systems to accommodate a certain number of connections and monthly rates and SEC charges. And with this, but we project out what our growth is. We have growth projected in these areas. If we knowingly make decision after decision to remove areas from the water and sewer connection requirements or from the systems,
And yet annex them.
if we don't require sewer connection, then we're not achieving the growth that we projected or the density there. And so all the rates that we've had in place between now and the time where we're broke again
Mhm.
have been artificially low because we were
Seeing the higher growth.
customers out.
Correct.
And so that's really, that's a key issue that I think that you guys can grapple with this, is that if you're not annexing it in order to develop to meet the growth projections of our sewer system, what are you doing? And
What's in it for the city? That's awful as it sounds. Nothing's shown.
and then just as bad for you in your position, if you put too many requirements on it, walk away.
Exactly. So what are we doing this evening?
Whether
you-
we're requiring infrastructure on this.
Well, I mean, for
Oh,
us,
awesome.
right, so for us, it would help to know whether or not you want to require infrastructure improvements, and we can come up with better numbers. If you want to choose which geographical modification, that would help us, because we wouldn't waste time on ones you wouldn't want to consider. And then what other information do you need to help you make a decision?
I guess, did you need to do the pricing again for what it's gonna cost?
Well, I didn't do anything for water. We
Okay.
just need to do further analysis
So,
for that. I did, and then I need to recalculate the sewer. So.
right, okay, so that, and then I guess, are we deciding, we're not deciding anything, we're just,
Are there any
Talking
options you
right now,
don't want
but-
us to consider?
Right, yeah.
Because every option takes quite a bit of staff time to review.
right,
So if there's any that's like
I don't think
obviously
option
like.
3 is viable.
no, I don't either.
I just
helpful.
don't see where the city can afford to do that.
Right. Well, I mean, even option 2.
And option 2 is pretty tough. Now, the question
Yeah.
becomes, do you want to do option 1 or do you just want to do the initial?
But
Michael's
also
got something.
including the
Well-
system development fees.
And I thought option one, it says the likelihood of passing is 0% because the neighboring property doesn't want to be annexed. Is that not correct? Am I reading that? Because I've got it set up here, and it's like it says initial proposal, which is what he's asking for right now. The likelihood of passing is 100% because it's just his property. Option 1, we have 0%. Option 2, we have 75, and option 3, we have 50. And if we're saying options 2 and 3 don't make sense just because of how big it is, or it's the cost of doing those doesn't seem to make sense. And option 1 is not even, it won't pass. Then the only real option is figuring out what we want to do with the initial proposal. In my mind, unless I'm reading something incorrectly.
Or option 2.
And my question is to Liana, you said something about 60%. Okay, run that by us again.
So in order for the annexation to go through, you have to have the property owners that own 60% of the assessed valuation in the area to be annexed. So, John's lot's $100,000, the neighboring lot's $400,000 combined, that's $500,000. I need to make a round numbers better. Close.
10 lots. at $20,000.
10 lots.
So you would have to bring in the Bradley property
60% of that.
Mhm,
plus John's property,
mhm.
plus Olson's property, plus Stoley's property, or Stoll's property.
Not,
Well, no.
Bradley wouldn't be a requirement.
Pardon?
Bradley wouldn't be a requirement. But Stoley.
Why would Bradley's not be? Because it's adjacent.
It's
Well-
farther up in service area. It's farther up the hill.
I think he's trying to get to 60%. He's trying to
Oh.
draw him back.
But
Right.
all of his, none of his neighbors wanted to annex in. So,
One did, but they were already in city.
oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Well, one way to get it is if I said, okay, fine, let's annex my major piece, which my big house is on and all that, which that'll put me over the 60%.
Yeah, but then we have that same access challenge.
On
That's
touching-
the whole- I know, but what I'm getting at is like, and I know you're on a private street,
That's
but still.
They
it's
call it
just-
Quas Road. It was a gravel road. I put it just to get to the house. I don't even name it.
I know it's, that's where we're getting all these conundrums. So. That's how we got all the way to the west end. Yeah, I mean, so that is an option as well. You could include his other parcel to be inside city limits, which would kick it over. That's.
Now we're talking about option 2.
Oh, it's a
It'd be-
different option for.
It'd be an option for,
Yeah.
talking about the property just to the east,
Oh, okay.
right?
So option 1 with John's.
Oh, he owns that one. Yeah. Yeah. So he owns this one, this one, this one.
Okay, well, so the likelihood on that one goes up from 0%.
Yeah. So
The trouble with
we
that
could
one
do,
is
we
that
could,
there's no access to these lots. This is a
Mhm.
private road. So the city would have to take that as a.
well, but he's not on city's water, he's not on city sewer, so.
It's still infrastructure that would be required to annex to.
Right, if we're
That's the
annexing and we're
question.
saying we need those things, then if we add his lot so that we can annex the other property, but
Mhm.
then we don't require any of the things that we say we want to that we want to offer for all city lots for our citizens, if that's like part of our main goal is getting that for everybody. And then we go, okay, well, to get his 4 lots in, we'll add this, even though we're not going to offer any services to it or require any services for it, then we're just taking away from our main
Well,
goal
but-
for the city.
But for him, I mean, his well is working great now. There are wells that go out in the fall, just up the road. So again, it would be additional assurances. We would then have to figure out how to get water. There is some water.
It goes to the water house.
Yeah, yeah,
It's on my
so,
property.
yeah, so there is some water, already available down there, but, and it's a private road, so no city infrastructure to those additional lots, but it is kind of, that's why we went all the way to Bone Road. Because it also clears up some other issues that we've had as far as we get, yeah, that's our growth area. It cleans up the loop road issue, cleans up half a Bone Road issue. I mean, so, anyway, that's why it has a 75% chance of going forward. But again, what level of infrastructure do you want? Infrastructure improvements you want to require? And then there's just,
Yeah.
God, it's challenging. Sorry.
So-
Sorry, we can't be more help.
Mhm.
Details of what the trigger is for when sewer has to go in. There's details about how to pay for it. Those are all details we can work out as part of an annexation process. And as this annexation process unfolds more.
Yes, okay.
And so here's another property owner in that area we're talking about now who also needs water. This is the property that's initiated the annexation before that never went through, but
You want up off Bone Road? Yeah, right across from me.
so, sorry.
Now we gotta talk about you.
Or stop talking about you, Century.
Is, I think that would be a major decision, whether sewer should be required for this area.
If and when.
Or,
I
yeah,
think that-
timetable on sewer.
And then we can
Whether,
do, we can do scenarios to get you a decision about how it gets paid for, if it gets paid for, when it gets paid for, all of that. Between now and the next time. We don't have to make a decision.
I think, and I'm just gonna go out on a limb. I think that if we annex, should be both.
Mhm.
And the next question is when
Within 10 years.
And then Ben's gonna work on how.
Mhm.
I'm with
and
you.
how, yeah.
Okay, so when both team, right now, right,
No,
so.
Ben's gonna work on that.
You clearly said.
You started this, Ben.
Then,
But then the other part is like, how much interest is there in that bigger picture? Going all the way over to Bone, like, is it worth running it up the flagpole? Because it does seem like it would be, like, making it worth staff's time.
Well, so that's the other thing. So the technicalities as far as why you don't need to make a decision tonight is, while we received the application on June 30th, the actual notice of intent wasn't included in that application packet. So technically, we have another few weeks. And so,
Cool.
sorry, John, I know. Yeah. But what I'm getting at is, if you would like more information on the property owners in that area and what they would like to have, or what would
Yes.
make them approve an annexation,
We talk
we
about the
can,
Bone Road
yeah,
side.
we can poll the property owners that are there. Because again, the last time that it fell apart was with those, with the requirements that were listed in generalities. And so we can kind of figure that out. If that's something that you want to move forward with,
Yes.
trying to.
Well,
look at.
that's the other part is, I can see your mind, you're just like, okay, so on the off chance that we're gonna get enough interest, what's it gonna cost? And how are we gonna do it? How are we gonna make a sewer system up there? How are we gonna get water? Luckily, water's right there on the road, but sewer is running down the gut on the other side.
and there's kind of a weird, the way the parcels are laid out, you can't just put under a road for that. How,
Mhm.
you have to get easements. All of
Yeah.
that. Good maybe fine, but-
The other thing too is, gotta talk about zoning. How are you gonna zone it?
This is all details that filter through as we move along, right?
Right.
That's not.
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah,
The more, so we required Mr. Goodman to poll all his neighbors with no information. Do you want to come in and say whether it's or not?
And they're like, nope.
And, yeah, so the lack of information, there's decision making. So as we move forward, talking to these people, we want to be able to, yeah, you be zoned to this, what's your current use of property? Yeah, that's not going to be any violation. That'd be continue to be allowed. If you wanted to divide it, you could do it at this number of lots on there. Having that information helps us with the next phase of go forth and talk to everyone else.
Oh, and by the way, it's gonna be $50,000 at some point. That changes really fast, so
Yeah.
So we're back down to, do we want to proceed and do we require improvements? Do we want to
Or
proceed?
do we want more information?
Right now, it's do we want to proceed and what level of improvement? We can start putting the Legos together after that. Right? So we're more
I
like
think,
boiled down to.
so, okay, so a path forward that we can do, is we can look at some cost scenarios for, and these would be rough, similar to what I just did. We can just figure out, like how much length of sewer would be needed and roughly where it would go, and a very rough estimate, for extending sewer to the area to be annexed. And we can also poll the property owners in option 2 to get, to see sort of where they stand and what they're looking at.
What's your thoughts? Are you interested in annexation? Is that why you're here tonight? Or are you just looking for some more information so you can?
Looking for information. just want to see what's happening in the neighborhood with sentiment and where things are going. I grew up in a development family, and I knew that would be an area that the city with such a weird shape would be eager to encompass at some point. Right now, our goal for the property is to have a hobby farm out there to actually grow vegetables and stuff and sell at Saturday market and stuff. So that's part of the reason we tried to acquire it, but we did spend a bunch of money on a dry well out there. You know, there's a mixed.
This is me.
Maybe meeting a neighbor tonight. We're the cities who live over
Andrew looks like a van, California to say.
there.
It's shorter now.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I just wanted to learn about the process and what's going on. I can understand with city growth and need for other things on there. It seems like the city doesn't have, I've seen all the infrastructure that's being improved, which from what I understand is a lot of overdue improvement and stuff like that, but you're doing the work. Like that is a relief to see. So I just want to be a part of the process, at least as a listener, and to be informed on what's happening and know what my neighbors want as well, you know what their goals are for their properties and things like that. So.
Sounds like it makes a difference to this group whether or not we see the likelihood. So sounds like understanding whether or not it would even go through is a big factor,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, I think before we even try to crunch any numbers, we should have a couple plans for the neighbors that we're thinking to say, hey, this is what this would look like.
So
this is
are
what
the
we can do.
likelihood percentages off of polling?
So the likelihood percentages, no, are off of the annexation request that was received prior to, so the notice of intent to annex. Right. And it was just kind of based off of that. And then the Goodman's properties. So it was just a
Okay.
swag and
So,
yeah.
okay.
But again, that asterisk, no requirements. So
Okay.
all of those were kind of like the only cost to them to annex is the application fee.
Right.
Yeah, I would consider the Salus and Poly request to be moved because their objectives were totally different than ours. So Leona, I'm looking right now at page 30, which is the existing sewer service. In order to get him sewer, the shortest route is to continue on up Frank Jones, correct?
Yep.
Carolyn?
New
Is
main
that
D.
correct?
Yep.
With the new main D.
The rest of Maine D.
It is the rest of Maine.
The
This
rest
is
of
like
Maine.
Maine
Rest of
phase
Maine
one.
D.
Yeah.
And there's water already there.
So also just
So how does that impact the other property owners along Frank Jones to the south of the proposal?
We may be able to pick them up.
so
Or
we
they-
would
they
either
be
do, yeah, we would either do a latecomers or an LID. Yeah.
Okay.
That changes what they're, so now how far? What is the burden? What does the proposer? How close does the city have to get to their house? If you say, all right, infrastructure is required, but the closest sewer is 1,000 feet or more. Does that person need to pay for that full 1,000 feet or more?
And then they can do a latecomers. But yes, I mean, it doesn't state how they will get it paid. It does state that they won't oppose an LID, which is if the city were to do it. But I mean, if they had all the money in the world, they could do it themselves. You know, but we understand that that's not a viable option.
But if we say, yes, we would like to have you bring sewer beyond city sewer. That seems like that could be a deal breaker right there. Why should I pay for 2,000 feet of city infrastructure if I'm only
Right.
gonna need this much?
Well, and that's why we would do it with an LID. And that LID doesn't just put it all on that one property. It distributed amongst the property that would be accessing that infrastructure.
I think maybe this just models it for you, maybe it helps it out.
By all means, feel free.
Muddle away.
We're still gathering info. So Main D project that we just did this year was to serve area that had developed when it was in the county at county densities in the 70s or so. It was annexed into the city in 2003 or 4.
That was that V.
The
Right.
lower B is there were failing septic systems and people needed access to city sewer and it wasn't available. So we annexed it in. There was no consideration of how to pay for sewer or whether sewer would be required there. Didn't happen. Septics either are continuing to fail up there or private investment was done to get new systems in place because this public option, though it was available, there wasn't anybody paying for it. Fast forward 15 years and the city comes through and pays for it. You have a new public works director who's overwhelmed with the job as it is and now overwhelmed with a job that should be private development in some way, but it's run as a public job to make up for lack of decision-making by past city councils. The rest of this upper B is the same decision
issue.
where a main B still needs to run to city limits. We still need to close that gap from past city councils. And now we're considering more for farther up the hill. The ideal is that Mr. Goodman has a 20 lot plan put together he's gonna be able to recoup that cost for the initial outlay, and then he's gonna run a private latecomer agreement. He's gonna be recouped by everyone else that connects to it over the next 15 or 20 years. Those ideal situations for it to rely on, and it's out of the character of the vision he wants to see for his property. So how do you make it happen? Do you make it happen? Hard decisions. And
That is a small thing. We're knowing what a neighbor who has a huge parcel, like what their objectives are, that matters to me. You know, if there's a way that we can make both of our objectives coexist, that would be great. You know, because for me, I just found out about this like 45 minutes ago, so I came kind of rushing in. So I was curious about, okay, where this stem from, and I can understand.
It's clear on the other side of Live Road or something.
Okay, it's not on the bone side, it's on the
St. John's.
But it just opened up the conversation. Like, okay, if we're gonna do this, why don't we
But that was-
expand the vision a little bit?
Yeah, for me, whenever I've considered how we would use our property, it's always been mindful of a property to our north or a property to our west. They have a lot of say in what those boundaries look like, so I just wanted to be respectful of that. And that's a lot. That is a lot of infrastructure. And the county, the city specifically needs housing. Like that would be kind of an amazing opportunity to build housing.
We
So-
need affordable housing for our working class.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm aware, like I know housing is super short. It's a reason we're still trying to get our feet under us and we're trying to build our goals.
So are we back to the original questions?
So I have now, both water and sewer to be required. The question I have is level of street improvements or street improvements, no street improvements, middle of the road street improvements.
And you're talking about that piece that abuts The proposal.
whichever area we are doing an annexation on, yeah.
Lucas Road isn't even 15 feet wide. That would be part of the street improvements in that. Square, Frank John Stone Square. a
I feel
rectangle.
like requiring street improvements is gonna make it stop immediately.
Well, even the sewer.
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, never mind.
John just wanted
Okay.
water,
Right.
and now you'll be paying for sewer, and maybe you will.
Mhm. I get it from both ways. I know we need it. It's just a big cost.
That's the thing, we don't need it
Well,
currently. We don't need it.
so if we don't need
it's
it
not
to
our-
keep it up to city standards, then we don't even,
No, we don't
No,
need it right now because it's not within.
It's
city
not in
limits.
city limits.
right, so, but
So-
if we annex them, then we require them to put in the streets, right?
That would
That's-
be my
that's what I'm
hope,
talking
because
about.
otherwise we just add land that is. Puts us, our percentage of land that it does not meet, the percentage of parcels. That don't have access to a standard level of service for sewer, water, streets. Goes up.
Put it the way you talked about too. The potential conflict in priorities, so.
Doesn't mix in with the comprehensive plan, doesn't.
It Makes it
This
with the
jump
comprehensive plan, but what you all said and what we're having trouble interpreting was that you want the Public Works Department to focus on improving what we already have and not extending. And so
Preventative maintenance
Yeah.
and, yeah,
does that mean that you don't want to extend you don't want a private developer to extend a sewer line? Or does that mean you don't want the city Public Works Department to fund sewer lines as public projects? What do you mean when you say focus on what we have instead of expansion? We don't know the answer.
Because, I mean, realistically, if this is annexed in and we do a developer agreement requiring all these things, and there's a certain amount of time put on it, and someone wants to do a subdivision or development, that jumps ahead of all the other projects that we have going on. In essence. Because even in the plan that we have, there are areas outlined for sewer extensions and water line extensions that are developer driven. So it's whatever developer comes to the line first is the direction that we'll go. So, I mean, and it kind of drives what improvements we make. Now, the reason why we did Main D now is because we were planning on street improvements to Loop Road, to this section of Loop Road. So again, we want to make sure that the infrastructure underneath is done before we lay a road on it.
Right.
And so if the challenge with requiring them to do all of the infrastructure improvements, or even a portion of them, is that it jumps ahead of areas that are in the city that need improvements as well, because of some time frame and other outside forces driving it, potentially.
I mean, we could always just dig the street up 3 or 4 times. We could do that too.
Right? I mean, wow.
Michael,
You're a funny guy.
I could interject, but like one thing on that, depending on parcel size, geology, slope and things like that, it may be that you could offer, as long as the city after annexation is offering those services for people to connect to and trying to make it reasonable for future development, cost wise. If someone's slope geology and all that stuff is amenable to septic on site, you give people the choice. That's one of the things that makes me tentative about annexation is all of a sudden I'm under all these thou shalls.
We talked about this septic.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I get for being late. But as a person out there,
I don't know if everybody knows you. Introduce yourself and tell them where your property is, so you can get a.
Spencer Dunn.
Oh, I was gonna help you.
Yeah, first name is
I
actually
forgot.
Mike, as some know, Ben. Shh. And we got our family to help us purchase a property at 81 Bone Road, which is the third driveway up. That 3-acre parcel, sort of an L-shaped space. on
Kind
Bone
of,
Road.
kind of behind, Hans.
Yes, Hans would make our property a perfect square, and it was actually parceled off at some point in the legal description of our property, so. And they were able to connect to city water before, they were grandfathered in, so they connected to city water and they have those. So. That's mostly it for
But
some of the
that's,
business.
that's the
problem.
that's the conundrum that we're finding ourselves in,
Yeah.
is annexation, sure, but we would keep inheriting or potentially inheriting not up to our service standards. So
Yes.
who's gonna pay to bring them up to service standards?
Yeah.
So it's just adding on more improvements that we're already trying to corral, that we've actually just spent quite a bit of time getting public input on the next several years on roads and adding more roads that need help.
Yeah,
So how important is annexation to the city? How important is it to the applicant?
yeah,
So that's where we're at.
I understand, you guys have.
And then who's gonna pay for all that? The city does not have a lot of money.
Yeah, and, I mean, I guess that's like part of being a city, and being outside the city means you get to have that flexibility. Like, I don't want to do the utilities. I'm going to drill a well. I don't want to pay for, be under anyone's thumb. So I'm going to be in the county, which is great. But the infrastructure that supports your neighbor who is on city services is sized to include your parcel. And
Yeah.
so your neighbor's paying for the infrastructure size to accommodate everyone that's on septic in the city limits is not paying their piece
Yeah.
of the sewer system.
Yeah, the water's on our side, and we can't tap in.
Right?
So it's-
I get that on my property. Just go during a midnight drill hole.
Yeah, so I
It's
understand.
not ideal,
We
but
have a lot to balance, and the city
Yeah.
and the county are not like loaded, so I understand the things you're trying to balance.
And the project that John's working on didn't include hundreds of thousands of dollars to extend sewer so that he could provide water to future landowners.
Yeah,
Well, if that's the case, that I have to provide the sewer, it would probably not happen.
That's exactly what
It
we're
just makes
struggling
it-
with.
I couldn't make that much money back on the property.
a developer
That's the
could,
problem.
but they would put in a lot more homes, right? 'Cause they'd have.
Be a shame.
Yeah, it would be a shame.
That's, yeah, that difference in vision is absolutely what, there's a huge tension in your potential annexation area because people move there to be out in the country. And it's less and less the country every day.
Well, and it's like the conversation that was had about the sheds up in the Angel Heights area up in there. Everybody, people were complaining about their neighbors putting a shed in, yada, yada, yada. It's all about vision
Or what you're looking at.
or what you're looking at, that's right. Or what you don't want to look at.
I guess that leads right into Carolyn's question too. Well, visions don't align. Why are we taking on this infrastructure?
Why do we want 4 more $100 million homes that don't pay into our infrastructure? Why does the city want that?
City doesn't want that.
Well, when you put it like that,
Well, and also the reality is, so this is on a timeline. And so you have 60 days from when they submit their intent to annex to make a decision.
and when was the intent? submitted?
Yep. It was on August 19th. Thank you. And so October 19th roughly is when you have to decide. That being said, if you want more information, staff's already tapped with everything else we have going on. But because of the time frame on this, it tends to jump, and so other things fall. So it's just a matter of priorities. How far do you want to go? If you're already thinking one way or another.
And, but one of the things I was wondering if it'd be helpful is finding some breakover point where the investment in like new lines, improvements of the lower lines that could handle the feed from lines up higher on the hill or whatever, find some breakover point where I just have no idea what that is. You guys might know what that is in dollar terms as far as infrastructure improvements, but at some point, having more subscribers to city water, city septic and services is going to be the only thing apart from of the same.
Well, so there's the concept of more customers and paying the SDC charges and helping us accommodate or fulfill our growth projections. There's that nugget, but then there's that gap between what is and what needs to be to make those subscribers happen. And that's what we're struggling with right now. Who's going to pay for that? Now, if someone came in and bought a big chunk of land, a big developer, and they were going to make a neighborhood, and your requirements are that you will bring water and sewer and street improvements, like all these subdivisions that we have, that's just part of the deal. John's looking for some water so we can sell a couple pieces of property, which is bang, trigger. Now what? See, so these are all the moving pieces that we're dealing with.
It's responsibility to help John sell those parcels.
I mean, it doesn't sound like we have the capacity to annex anything
Without doing sewer.
without
and water.
completely like
Sticking to our
negating the
guns
point of-
on requiring improvement.
Without the parcels that are being annexed, bringing to the table what they need to.
Well, you already heard from me.
Do you guys want more information? Do you want us to spend
Yes.
time on that?
I don't need more information. I think if we
What
do
are you
it,
thinking?
I think that the line needs to be extended up. Sewer and water both, not just water.
And just on Frank John's or Frank John's to Bone Road.
Well, I think initially just on Frank John's.
Dave and I are in the same boat on that as well. I think if we're going to do it, and we keep saying that we're going to stick to the plan, the comprehensive plan, the things we've talked about, and making it so that everybody has that same level playing field. And we're saying one of those things is we have to have sewer within the city limits. I think we're going to annex this property, and I think that it has to have the water and the sewer. That's my feeling on it.
And additionally, Ben's already talked about some of these properties within the V up there that are getting close to failing or are failing.
See it all the time.
And how do we address that? And we can't address it unless that line is up there.
So if we're going to require those services, then whose responsibility is it to get creative with putting together the latecomers and
I think I vote the mayor.
Michael?
That's the second time he's called you Michael.
Hill name's coming next.
We worked that out.
One of the things I think went wrong with the Bone Road annexation that we considered is that deferral of frontage improvement agreements led to more questions than it led to answers by the people reading. And so I would think that we would try to do something different this time around,
A
like
different type of outreach.
not, yeah, definitely that, but maybe something that's a little more simple, like no certificate of occupancies can be issued for a new dwelling in this area until sewer. And so that I'm trying to answer the question of who figures out how to pay for it. We tried to figure out how to pay for it as a city, as part of that process, or we might just leave that as a decision that can be made later that keeps all options on the table. Doesn't walk anything down a certain path. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I also think it was
There was a lot of vagueness to what was required and there weren't any cost estimates that I could see. So I wouldn't want to sign something
Right.
that I might be
That's what I'm
cost
thinking.
me $1 million. No. So I think if we provide more dollar figures, even ballpark around how much it might
Yeah.
cost you if we were to do an LID for all of these improvements, that might help people make a more informed decision.
Mhm.
As opposed to a knee jerk.
Right,
Right.
I agree.
The question also could be, how much would you be willing to put
Yes.
into?
Yeah.
And if you get $5,000 for everybody, then you know there's like no way. But I mean, I think an important thing to think about though is that as part of our sewer plan, we are working on identifying the timeline to get sewer to every, available to every parcel. So this is not necessarily a no, it might be a not now. Like, we can't do this now. But it will be, or, you could do it now if you wanted to, but it's gonna be, it's gonna be on you. You could wait 10 years and then it gets that much shorter for you.
Well, that's the thing that I thought that the capital improvement plans kind of roll the dice, okay, which way should we anticipate growing and extending services? Sometimes something like this will help us decide, but that's not good. You're right. Might not be,
Mhm.
it might shift the CIP, but it might not actually change it overnight. So. I don't know if that makes any sense. Because that was the whole point about being able to draw that, to paint that picture. Why are you going that way? Because we think that's where it's going to go. Well, what if I want to do this thing over here? Well, let's talk. Paint that.
There's interest.
And so I think what I'm hearing, so water requirements, sewer requirements,
Ballpark on the LID.
ballpark on an LID amount, and then street and storm. I know, so street and storm, I mean, we really don't have other
welcome
means to get. Like water and sewer, there could be SDC's charges or utility rates that we get, but streets and storm are just,
But they don't generate any revenue.
nope, not yet. Storm, I mean, hey, if that's something you guys want to take on, we can do a stormwater utility.
Perception. That is not true. But it becomes true with decisions like this, where an LID is a component of the annexation, where you're agreeing to pay back the improvement. All that, listen, so you just said over the next 20 years. So there's a 20-year bump in your tax rate, and then it goes down after the LID is paid off. But it's just discuss that table that Leon put out there. You annex into the city, you're no longer paying the county road, you're no longer paying fire protection district, and instead you're paying the city rate, and that's about the same. So
There's no change in fire protection either, because it's the same department answering calls, no change in your sheriff. I mean, again, like the services that you get, it's really the utilities and plowing.
So what I'm hearing is that you don't want to say no tonight, but there is strong sentiment to requirements for infrastructure improvement.
Well, like you said, like, I don't want to sign anything without having an idea of what it's going to be.
And for streets, we can see what a middle of the road option would be, maybe sidewalks on one side for. So,
Oh, boy.
well, what we got right now, I mean, one sidewalk would be better than zero.
Mhm.
The conversations that used to occur when the county was flush with timber funds was that, okay, county might do this improvement for you if that means that they're never gonna have to maintain this again, bring it into the city. And so they are another player that we can talk to if there's a chip seal or some PCR. improvement.
Yeah, so Frank John's,
Like, they're
yeah, they have, so Frank John's Road was the lowest rated pavement condition of all the roads. And so again, based on just a rough estimate from what we recently got, it'd be about $11,000. So,
Is that like a chip seal?
Yeah. The only thing that bothers me about the road is that, and I mean, we haven't talked about, you know, what our minimum bulk search for roads are that we want to, you know, we want to shoot for. So do we want that sidewalk to go, you know, that started up Frank John's to go all the way so that people can walk into town?
I could make it less steep.
Or do
You
we
might
not?
get my butt.
right, right?
Yeah.
A little
exactly.
switchback, but
Yeah.
We're out of here.
ADA, anyone?
I don't think there's a whole lot to be done for like road necessarily. Like it's never gonna have the two parking spots on either side and sidewalk. I mean, it's not gonna ever look like Russell, so it probably is not. But sewer and water, that's expensive. You can't see it.
Good.
yeah, I have direction. We'll talk later on how.
Do I have direction? Do direction for me.
And David, next time, don't talk so much.
Yeah. I think this was super helpful as far as getting where you're sitting, and what you want. Next time, after we do some engagement with those property owners, we might have some pushback for the scope of the improvements that you want to ask for. But at least we know where that is, so.
Wish
We
everybody
know
could
where we
see it
need to
from
work.
both
But
sides.
then we already talked about the trigger for, okay, now you need to do this. Okay, if there's septic fails, guess what? You will
Mhm.
attach.
Right.
Well, the other thing is with septics, like, unless they're submitting like annual reports or doing annual inspections, they might not even know their septic is failed. Like, that needs to be defined to better understand like what that means. But septic's.
Well, what are you
can
gonna do? Like force people to like submit their septic inspection records?
I don't know, but what else can you do if
Yeah.
the
If
requirement is?
they're annexed into the city.
Well, I'm in the
Well,
city.
I mean-
people that are in the city and are
I'm
on
in the
septic.
city. I have
Yeah,
septic.
yeah.
Not failing, definitely not failing.
Sure.
So we good?
I think we're good for now.
Okay.
The answer's not no.
The answer is not no. How about
Just
that?
gonna take more time.
Send it back.